Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes.
And I'm Simon Mann.
It's the 17th of February, 2 days before the start of the Champions Trophy. The first time we've had this tournament, actually, for 8 years. Of course, it all takes place in Pakistan and also in the Middle East. And we're going to preview it today. 8 teams taking part, and we're going to try and tell you who's going to win it. So, because of the way it's scheduled, Simon, because it's 2 groups of 4 and you only have to win potentially 2 games, I suppose, in those groups to get to the semi-finals, it's quite a lottery picking a winner. What would you say?
I don't think it's a lottery to pick a winner at all. I think India will win it.
Okay, fair enough. Well, so do our...
that doesn't mean we're right, Yoz. That doesn't mean I'm right. I'm just saying I think India are clear favourites, for me anyway.
Your predictions for the Australia-India series recently were a lot less convincing than that suggestion. I remember you sat on the fence. You said, well, it's going to be 3-2, but I don't know to which team. I thought that was an absolutely pathetic answer. But
it was a pathetic
India
answer.
This time. You've gone for India this time. And so have the respondents to 2 polls that I've posted, one on Twitter and one on our World's Best Cricket Club, Virtual Cricket Club. And in the Twitter poll, 60% say India are going to win. Australia down as 14%, and South Africa 11%, and any other 14%. So India runaway favourites in the Twitter poll, which has about 500 or 600 respondents, to our World's Best Cricket Club poll, which are people who are actually steeped in the game from all over the world and really study the form as well. So India 45%, New Zealand or Pakistan 15%, so equal. England and South Africa 6% chance, and Australia only 3%. Interestingly. So, anyway, to back your point, India overwhelming favourites.
Yeah, well, look, they've got the game, they've got the players, they've got the conditions, and they've probably got that sort of slight advantage, about the fact they're playing in the UAE as well. So they'll play all their games in the UAE, and everyone else will be playing in Pakistan. Come to them to play their matches, and so they're kind of a bit more used to the conditions, probably. Whereas people, coming over from Pakistan to play them. So, yeah, look, they're a good side. They're a very good side. They won the last T20 World Cup. They're the team to beat, I would say. Doesn't mean to say they're going to win it, because you can have a bad day, can't you? One bad day. They nearly lost the T20 World Cup final in Barbados to South Africa, who gave it a real good go. And on the day, you thought at one point that South Africa were going to win the match, and they kind of blew it, really. So, look, in India, for me, let's see how it shapes up. You say it's a lottery. What I would say, though, is that every match counts. That's the thing about it. That's so kind of every phase of play matters. Every game matters, unless, of course, you've lost your first 2 games, you're already out. What I'm saying is that there's not much room for slip ups. In the World Cup, you could lose a few games, couldn't you, in the group stage and still make it through to the semi-finals. In this, you've got to be on it. You've got to be on your A game right from the start. Just like you were when you played. Every match, you were on your A game right from the start, when you, especially those NatWest finals where you turned up late.
Yeah, I think actually that I was one of those players who peaked in about my 4th over, about the 3rd ball. So it took me about 4 overs to warm up. And then by the 3rd ball of my, say, 5th over, I was really flying and bowling beautifully. Then by about the 6th over, I was knackered and had to be taken off. So I feel I only peaked for about 2 balls in a spell. Anyway, that's a completely irrelevant point for this tournament. Now, of course, Pakistan are actually the holders of this tournament. Interestingly, they won it in 2017, and in a way, it was an
gloriously they won it in 2017.
And actually, it was quite an interesting tournament, that, because it shaped England winning the World Cup, didn't it? Because in that semi-final, which famously was on the same day as the Grenfell Tower fire, that awful tragedy in West London. And I remember it well because travelling to Cardiff for that semi-final, Pakistan-England, I passed this building on fire to go to Paddington to get the train. Got a tragic story, of course. But England just collapsed that day, didn't they? They'd played such good cricket in that tournament. They'd beaten Australia, actually, beforehand. and they got to the semis and they just capitulated to Pakistan, who played a much cleverer, smarter brand of cricket. And England couldn't get out of the blocks at all. And their whole sort of campaign expectation that they would win the Champions Trophy derailed at that point. But I think it was a very important learning moment for them and enabled them to sort of play smarter cricket moving forwards, and which led to eventually winning the World Cup 2 years later.
Well, yeah, potentially. I think what undid England in that day in Cardiff, though, was the fact they weren't playing on a belter. So it wasn't a particularly flat pitch. There was something in it for the bowlers, and those conditions didn't particularly suit England. Of course, when they got to the World Cup and they got to the World Cup final, they played on a pitch that wasn't a belter as well, and they really struggled that day. New Zealand it felt as though New Zealand were outmanoeuvring them, and then we had that sort of freakish last couple of overs really, which helped England get over the line.
But the point is, they did get over the line, though. I mean, I take your point. They didn't play that well in that final, but they found a way of winning, which of course is the sort of Australian trademark, really. And England managed to win on that occasion. Anyway, I mean, England have hardly won since, of course, which is why they're not very high in the expectations of performance in this tournament.
Well, since the 2019 World Cup, I've been updating my stats with that one-day series in India. England have won 29 and lost 30 since the start of the last World Cup. They won 7 out of 23. Josh Buttler has lost 11 of his last 15 one-day internationals as captain. So those stats don't cry out England at all, do they? Don't cry out England for the semi-finals. They got to the Champions Trophy semi-final in 2017, but at the moment they do feel as though they're one of the also-rans. The only thing I would say is that that poll from the World's Best Cricket Club members, putting Australia well down the pecking order, because Australia are missing their bowling attack, aren't they? They're basically missing their World Cup bowling attack. So how, the reserves, the second string attack, how is that going to respond? So probably whoever wins between England and Australia on Saturday in Lahore, I've got a pretty good chance of making the semi-finals, I would say. So that's what I was saying about every match matters. England still got Afghanistan and South Africa, but big game if England want to make the semi-finals, and for Australia as well. So it'll be tough for both sides if they lose that opening game. South Africa lurking there. They've got some good attacking players as well. They've got some good options, although no Angarish Norkia. Afghanistan, not quite sure what they're going to come up with on the day. They've got some quality. Nearly beat Australia last time in the World Cup. They would have done apart from that Glenn Maxwell innings, and they did beat England. So it's actually a fascinating competition. I think Champions Trophy is a really good competition because every match kind of counts.
So the two groups are India, Pakistan, of course, in the same group. Bangladesh.
Why do you say, of course, yours? Just remind everyone why you say, of course.
Because it's the big money moment, isn't it, in international cricket, the India-Pakistan match. In any kind of ICC tournament, they're always manacled together, aren't they, in an ICC tournament? And they always choose a big moment for them to have their match. And it's always a sort of 500 million type audience across the world. It delivers the TV money, doesn't it? So it is a huge thing, and it's always seems to be engineered that India and Pakistan are in the same group. So India, Pakistan, New Zealand.
It doesn't always seem to be. It always is.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, they make it happen, don't they? They make it happen because it's the only time they play against each other, so they have to play each other in the group stage or whatever stage it might be.
So one group: India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, New Zealand, and as you mentioned, all India's matches in Dubai, which is a huge thing because that pitch does help spin more than most of the Pakistani one-day pitches, and they played there a lot, haven't they? They played an IPL or two in Dubai and in the Emirates, and I think that will really help India and their cause more than it would if they were playing in Pakistan. The other group is England, Australia, who seem to always be put together as well, and then Afghanistan and South Africa. So it's hard to call, isn't it, who's going to make it through. Let's have a look at the individual sides and sort of how we think they're going to shape up. I mean, for me, India, as the favourites, they're packed with fantastic batters. I feel their top order are just ageing a bit. I mean, I'm thinking obviously of Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli in particular. Shubman Gill, a much younger player. absolutely at the peak of his performance. So that in a way compensates for Sharma and Kohli just perhaps slightly past their best, but still very good. And then, some good middle order batters. But I think the strength of India is in their spin department, particularly because they've got Jadeja, they've got Akshar Patel, and they've included Varun Chakravarti as well, who's this sort of mystery spinner who bowls what looks like sort of googlies, but some of them spin a little bit to the off, and some of them go straight on. And he's a clever bowler that England never really figured out through that T20 series and one-day series in India recently. So I think that's the asset that they're going to really use in the Dubai pitches that they're going to play on. So how do you what do you see are India's strengths? Who of course, by the way, are missing crucially Jasprit Bumrah.
Yeah, that's the one thing, isn't it? They are missing Bumrah. He's an absolute gold standard bowler, but they look to me as though they got the options to still cope with his absence. Yeah, I mean it is a problem for them, but they're still packed full of quality in those conditions as well, I think, and I think that's the bonus for them, and they'll also get to play in those conditions the whole time, so they'll know them, they'll be adjusted to them better than the other teams who just drop in on them for the one-off match, whereas India will be presumably, well, they might be playing 3 games, they might be playing 4, they might be playing 5. And that's the other bizarre thing about it, is we won't know where the final is going to be staged until about 4 or 5 days before it actually happens, because you've got these 2 options, Lahore if India are in the final, and Dubai if India are in the final. So you could have this situation if Pakistan got to the final of them having to, go out of their own country to play the final, even though they're supposed to be hosting it. Well, that's happening anyway, because they're playing their group match against them in Dubai. But it's the compromise of world cricket. It's the finances of world cricket. We're all used to it now. We all kind of understand it. And you were working out, yours. You were saying, oh, well, look, India won't go to Pakistan. Don't let them in the tournament then. But you were saying, that would cost the game hundreds of millions of pounds, in that they would, the TV company in India who are staging it, showing it there, would say, well, hold on a second. We bought these rights with India in the tournament. It's no good to us if India aren't in the tournament. We won't be able to make our money back. And so there presumably would have been kind of lawsuits and things like that. Well, that's been headed off at the pass. Compromise done. That compromise is that Pakistan have to go out of Pakistan to play their matches against India, and then when the T20 World Cup comes around next year, Pakistan won't have to play their matches in India. They'll play in Sri Lanka. So that's the compromise. I think there's also another compromise with another ICC tournament where it might be a women's tournament where Pakistan don't have to play in India as well. So that's the deal that's been done to make this happen. And well, it's a world of compromises, isn't it? Everyone takes their position, probably to get things done, to move things forward. You do need to compromise.
Well, and in a way, the only reason the Champions Trophy is in existence at all is to generate revenue for the ICC. It really doesn't. It's not an important tournament in terms of the calendar, really, but because it's an ICC tournament, because it's short, it's only 3 weeks, it's quite popular. I don't think, anyone really ever remembers who won it, do they? They don't remember who won it like they remember the World Cup, but it does generate.
They do in Pakistan, because they beat India in the final. Yeah. I agree. I take your point. I
accept that. But point is, why is it there? Well, it's there because the ICC decided in their latest sort of scheduling that they would offer a world tournament every year. So it would either be a World Cup or a T20 World Cup or a Champions Trophy. So 3 out of 4 years is a major tournament. In fact, you get a T20 tournament every 2 years, don't you? And then the other years, it's either the 50 over World Cup or the Champions Trophy. And that's been their structure for the next 10-year cycle. And that has generated, sort of $6 billion. So if you sort of work backwards on that, Star TV paid about $3 billion per year for 5 years. So each year's major tournament is worth about 600 million. So that's how you can calculate what the value is to the ICC of having India involved in this tournament with Star TV as the host broadcaster. Anyway, we digress. And while we're talking about the subcontinent, Pakistan themselves, how good are they? So they just run a tri-series at home with South Africa and New Zealand. They didn't win it. They did get to the final, but actually New Zealand won that tournament. And we'll come to them in a bit. Pakistan, new opening pair, Fakhar Zaman and Babar Azam, have been pushed up to the top of the order. Haven't been entirely convincing. They have got, obviously, good batters. Mohammad Rizwan is now captain. For me, their batting is pretty good. Their bowling is a worry. For a while, I haven't been convinced by Shaheen Shah Afridi or Nazim Shah as their opening pair. And actually, they've only picked one main spinner as well, Abra Ahmed. So I'm not convinced by their bowling. How about you?
I feel that they may draw something from the fact they're at home and draw some energy from the fact they're playing at home. They might lift themselves. They've got some talent. To me, they're not obvious winners, but it is that Pakistan factor. Of course, they do play India away, and I can see them losing that match against India in Dubai, and then you're under pressure, aren't you? You lose one game, you've got to win your other two matches, and they do take on New Zealand in the opening game. And New Zealand have done well against them recently, and I actually quite like New Zealand. I think they might be a side to keep an eye on. Well, I mean that sounds patronising towards them. Actually, they've done pretty well in ICC 50-over tournaments. So yeah, I think for me, I don't really fancy Pakistan, but it is a short, sharp tournament, and they could turn it around and turn up, especially just using the adrenaline, the home support, and the feverish support they're going to get. You'd think with a home tournament. Well, I would say just one thing is I think it's great to have a tournament back in Pakistan. I never thought it would happen in my lifetime, but lo and behold, we've got one. Well, kind of. India not turning up, but Pakistan hosting an ICC tournament again is good for the game. It's good that these tournaments are spread around the world as much as possible, and everyone gets their go. So yeah, I mean, I hope they are successful. I hope they make something of it, and that they can sort of capture everyone's imagination. That I'm going to Pakistan on Wednesday. You hope that there's a real sort of kind of buzz around the tournament, and that will happen if Pakistan make some progress in the tournament. So, but I think it's sort of kind of like odds against, but it's a bit fingers crossed. It feels for Pakistan for me,
as usual. Really, they never know who's going to turn up, and of course they're always hamstrung by changes in personnel at the top. So Jason Gillespie's no more the coach, is he? Gary Curson's left as well. I mean, it's just hard to sort of get any kind of consistency, isn't it? With changes in personnel, changes in captain, etc. So I just think they don't find any momentum somehow. They stumble along almost as if they're so semi-blindfolded or one hand behind their back, despite the talent and despite the passion in their country. If you just compare India and Pakistan, the kind of focus and the consistency and the stability of Indian cricket is at totally at odds with Pakistan. Now, you mentioned New Zealand. I agree with you. I think they look dangerous. They've won all their games in that Pakistan tri-series that just occurred. They chased some quite big totals effectively. Again, a new opening pair, Conway and Ravindra opening the batting for them, at least they have done in the last couple of games. A new captain, Mitchell Santner, who's a crafty cricketer, good left-arm spinner, changes his pace cleverly, good batter at the end of the innings, except in the World Cup final where he ducked the last ball in New Zealand's innings, didn't he, against England, and that was a dot ball, which could have counted for a massive change in the final result. Missing Trent Boult and Tim Southey, neither of whom, or Tim Southey's retired. Trent Boult isn't sort of playing international cricket anymore. And actually, I think also the fact they haven't got Carl Jameson as well, who has again been injured for a while, very tall, difficult to score off, all-rounder. He hasn't really featured for a while. So they've had to kind of cobble together a slightly different attack. I mean, they've got pace. So they've got Will O'Rourke, who we both thought was really impressive in that Test series against England, and Lockie Ferguson coming back from injury, and Matt Henry, who's obviously very consistent. So a little bit of an unknown quantity with their opening bowling or their seam bowling, and then Santner and Glenn Phillips and one or two others to bowl spin. Yeah, so I think overall, Daryl Mitchell for me, fantastic cricketer, middle order batsman, can bowl as well, brilliant fielder, very good against spin, dangerous player. Kane Williamson, of course, as well, resident at number 3. So, good experienced team with lots of variety.
Yeah, no further questions, Your Honour. You convinced me. I think to me, they look definite semi-finalists. They'll probably lose all 3 matches now because we normally sort of don't include them, do we? When we talk about our predictions for tournaments, who's going to go well, we kind of think, oh yeah, New Zealand sort of in the, then sort of get the back of the stage. But this time, you feel as if they're kind of like front of stage. So perhaps there's a bit more pressure on them. But yeah, I'd expect them to get to the semi-finals. Personally, I think from that group, I think India and New Zealand will get to the semi-finals because the other team in that group, Bangladesh, who, this cricket mad country, they've just never really broken through. They've just glimpses of it in the last World Cup. But they've got this quick bowler I'm really looking forward to seeing. Nahid Rana tops over 150 kph, Bangladesh's fastest ever bowler. So perhaps in Pakistani conditions they might go well, and that matching against India and Dubai as well. But you'd think odds against for Bangladesh. So that's what I'm going for anyway in terms of my semi-finalists. I'm going for New Zealand and I'm going for India from that group.
Okay, well, we'll look at the other group after this break. Okay, so England's group features, of course, Australia, South Africa, and Afghanistan. And we haven't really talked about England yet, apart from to say, their recent record has been poor. I mean, how's Ben Duckett going to feel if England don't win the Champions Trophy after the comments he made, saying, well, we don't really care about the India series as long as we beat them in the Champions Trophy and win the Champions Trophy, all will be forgotten. Will it? I don't think so. And, well, he's really kind of putting his neck on the line there by saying that, isn't he?
Look, sometimes cricketers say things in the heat of the moment. I suppose what he's basically saying is the Champions Trophy is kind of like why we're here, why we're what we're preparing for, and that's the tournament we're really focusing on. And then now it's time to deliver. England haven't delivered at all in recent years. They've been really poor in one-day international cricket, so it's time to step up for them. Ben Duckett is fit. Of course, there was a question mark over his fitness. He had this groin problem. He was limping around in the last one-dayer, but he's been past fit. England had 1 or 2 fitness issues, and that's given us one of the reasons why they didn't train very much. And of course, Kevin Pietersen weighed in and said, why aren't England not practicing more? They're not playing particularly well. Why don't they practice some more? And I do have memories of Kevin Pietersen struggling against left-arm spin and seeing him net after net after net, say in Bangladesh, practicing against left-arm spinners, trying to work it out. So perhaps he's drawing on something that he did during his career. Or England perhaps just taking a step back and saying, look, it's quite a long, intense period of cricket, the 5 T20s, the 3 one-day internationals, and the Champions Trophy. We'll keep our powder dry and focus on the Champions Trophy. I think they've got a reasonable-ish chance of making the semi-finals. But if they've got to beat Australia, and because Australia do have a weakened bowling attack or a second-string bowling attack, that gives England an opportunity. And it's not India; they're not playing against India, and England have got some good players. I mean, it's about time they produce, isn't it? The good players they've got. They've got some talent both with bat and ball, and it's time to make that happen, really.
Yeah, no, and I think they'll enjoy Pakistan pitches as well, more than India. I mean, it's very different, isn't it, playing in Pakistan? The ball doesn't really spin much, and it comes onto the bat at a nice height. Harry Brook obviously loves it. He's made a number of centuries. I think it's 4 centuries in Test cricket in Pakistan. He's made a rapid 100 in the PSL as well. I think he averages 83 in Pakistan in all different formats. So, it is a place where batters who like the ball coming onto the bat and don't like too much of the ball stopping or spinning can thrive. So you think Ben Duckett has played well out there too, hasn't he? So you think they're thriving, that they should thrive, the batters. It's just whether the bowlers can defend the score that the England batters managed to cobble together, because that's been the problem, isn't it? England have got found out. They leaked too many runs early on. and there's not enough middle over control other than Adil Rashid. And really the death bowling hasn't really been kind of all that convincing either. So in a way, England are, they've got to make so many runs, I think, to compensate for the fact their bowlers are not reliable. And I'm not saying they're not good bowlers, and Jofra Archer is obviously outstanding, but even he can go for 10 and over. And the only kind of really reliable bowler is Rashid. So I think they will make it to the semis, actually, just because of the weakness of the other teams, especially Australia. So I think they potentially could make it to the semis. Australia's bowling attack, as you mentioned there, very different look to it. Potentially their seam bowling will be Sean Abbott, Nathan Ellis and Spencer Johnson instead of Cummins, Hazelwood and Stark. So that is a stark difference.
Yeah, Ben Dwarshuis is in there as well, in their 15-man squad. Yeah, I mean, it's a second-string attack. Australia are always competitive. They got some quality players as well. Travis Head gets away at the start and makes a thrilling 100. Then England are under pressure. There's some key wickets that need to be garnered pretty early on for England. So, look, they're the defending World Cup champions. They played superbly in that final. Wonderful performance against India, but they are missing a few. And that's an opportunity. You think it was an opportunity for England. They've also just done a couple of one-day internationals in Sri Lanka who didn't qualify for the Champions Trophy, and they got hammered, didn't they? But then very, very different conditions that they were up against there. You think subcontinent, but actually it's not quite the same, is it? Playing Sri Lanka, playing Pakistan. We've just explained that in the podcast. So, yeah, it's a big game. It feels like a 50-50 game, I would say. You normally come up against the world champions. You'd think probably, yeah, it might be a 60-40 game, especially with England's record recently, but it feels more like a 50-50 game in Lahore on Saturday. And it would be a huge fillip for whichever those two teams win. So then there's Afghanistan and South Africa. Now, people say, South Africa have never won an ICC tournament. Well, they won this competition in Bangladesh in 1998, actually, but it wasn't called the Champions Trophy back in that days. It was called something like the Wills Cup or something like that. So it's kind of ignored that South Africa actually won it. But I was there for them winning that competition in Bangladesh in 1998. But since then, it's been a record of sort of near misses. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I would sort of have them as definitely outside favourites to win this tournament, because I just think they got so close. They got so close in that T20 final, didn't they? They could have easily won it, really, against India.
They should have won it, shouldn't they? They should have won it.
Yeah, and they've got so much talent. And, of course, I think in the same way as the IPL has transformed Indian cricket, I think the SA20 clearly has done a huge service to South African cricket. I mean, it was interesting having Liam Dawson on our site, our virtual cricket club last week, saying he thinks now that the SA20 is the second best sort of short format tournament in the world after, of course, the IPL, better than the Big Bash, better than the English tournaments, better than the PSL, etc. And he's played in it for the last 2 or 3 years, and they can just hear the stories of the talent coming out of South Africa. So very powerful batting team. I mean, you pick out Heinrich Klaassen, of course, and a Popeye with a bat, David Miller, Tristan Stubbs, Aidan Markram, Vassie van der Dusen. So, they've got so many really powerful strikers of the ball and some genuine pace as well, with people like Kaiser Rabada, Lungi Ngidi, Marco Jansen, who's a very calm cricketer. He opens the bowling his left armers, but he's 6'8", so he gets awkward extra bounce. What I really liked about Jansen, actually, was his performance with the bat. He coolly saw them over the line against the West Indies in the T20 World Cup recently in Antigua, when the game was really a knife edge, and one team or the other could get through to the semis, and he managed to sort of see off the threat of West Indies, and I think got 20 off the last couple of overs or something. But it was a really nervy situation. He calmly put away the ball and saw South Africa to victory. So I just think he has an influence and will have an influence. And then, of course, they got 3 quite interesting different spinners as well. So I think they're well covered, South Africa, and they will be a big threat.
Yeah, I think they're going to get to the semi-finals. So, that's your first task, isn't it? Get to the last four, then see where that takes you. I agree with that. What about Afghanistan? Where do they stand in the pecking order in this competition? They only tweaked some noses, didn't they, in the last World Cup?
Yeah, they absolutely did, and they played. Obviously, they beat England, and they were very
should have beaten Australia.
Yeah,
really.
That's right, and they played great cricket. Got to the semi-finals of the World T20, well, I've just looked at their recent record. It's not that good. Played 34, won 15, lost 18. So I think they just get found wanting a bit with lack of penetration with the ball, opening the bowling. They have got good bowlers, but I don't think they're quite, top class. Obviously, Rashid Khan is one of the best spinners in the world and has been for the last 10 years, especially in short formats. But the rest of the bowling is a little bit hit and miss, and their batters are very good to about number 4, and then it tails off. So they're just still lacking a little bit of depth. They've got genial cricketers, but they have to string in a 50-over competition, especially. You've got to string it together. It's no good. I mean, it's T20. You can have 2 outstanding performers and you can win the match. But probably in 50-over cricket, you just need a bit more depth to the team, and I just feel they might get found out. So, that which makes me conclude, probably like you, that South Africa will make it through the semis from that group, along with England.
Okay. Well, I think it's a 50-50 game, England-Australia. I'm going to go South Africa-Australia to qualify for the semi-finals, and New Zealand and India. Those are my 4 semi-finalists, and India to go on and win the competition. But of course, it's just
good, isn't it? That's good that at least we haven't come up with 3 out of 4 semi-finalists from the same group, which a well-known former Australian captain did the other day.
Yeah. I think what did he go with? India, New Zealand, and Pakistan, I think, to make the semi-finals. Yeah, well, perhaps 2 of those 4. 2 of those 4 will, but not all 3 of them, because some of them are in the same group. Anyway, yeah, there we go. We'll draw a line under that. No, I think it's not the biggest competition, but it's actually a competition that's full of interest. I mean, there are quite a few players missing through injury, which is going to undermine the tournament a bit. But that's kind of always the case. I think it's rare that you have everyone fit at the same time for these events. So Champions Trophy, yours, and then of course once that's finished, move on. IPL starting, and the fixture list for that was produced this week, and that's all starting in a couple of weeks after the Champions Trophy finishes and goes on for a couple of months, and then the focus of India will shift to that, and they'll hope that on the back of another ICC victory to go with a T20 World Cup win.
Yeah, I mean, in relation to that, of course, all the noise at the moment in English cricket is about the sale of the 100 franchises, which I know we've dealt a bit with on this podcast. I mean, I just thought it was quite an interesting dynamic revealed in the Telegraph the other day by Nick Holt and Tim Wigmore, actually, that they did a whole kind of whole essay on the process of how the 100 franchises were sold. And one thing that emerged from that was as a sort of underlying story about the Ambanis, who are the richest family. Well, Mukesh Ambani is the richest man in India, probably in the top 10 in the world. He owns the whole Reliance company, which is a massive operation. Which one part of which it owns is all the broadcasting, pretty much the IPL broadcasting. So they have a big partnership with Jio, which is the biggest mobile phone operator in India. Reliance Jio is this huge multinational company, and Mukesh Ambani was desperate to own, alongside his Mumbai Indians and his Mumbai Indian Cape Town team and so on, he was desperate to own the MCC team, the London Spirit. But the Holt Wigmore article revealed that the MCC didn't actually want the Ambanis to own the MCC or the London Spirit, because I think they felt quite a powerful family who don't take no for an answer, and might not be that easy to work with. So even before it went to auction, the Umbani's bid was sort of pushed away, rejected effectively. So they weren't allowed to actually enter the bidding for the London Spirit, even before the auction started. So I think almost as a sort of olive branch, the ECB kind of more or less gave them the Oval instead. And so they now own the Oval Invincibles, which they got for a bit of a steal, actually, at about 60 million. Whereas the London Spirit went for 145 million, so the 49%. So, quite a difference. But I think it's set up quite an interesting dynamic because Umbani, a little peeved to not got the MCC and Lords, now owning the Oval, Surrey, effectively, and the tech billionaires who are formerly Indian, who bought London Spirit, the MCC franchise, all desperate to prove themselves as well. So I think there's going to be quite an interesting duel going on behind the scenes in the sort of boardrooms between the Ambanis and the tech titans, as they've been called, who own the London Spirit. And one of the little moves they've already made is to sign Kane Williamson for the London Spirit as captain, and also he's going to play for Middlesex this summer, which is brilliant news for the county, who couldn't afford an overseas player last year. So this year, with the money that's eventually going to come in from these investors, they've decided to go with Williamson. And I don't think you could get a better overseas player than him, because not just his ability, but just his personality as well. He's such a giving character. He's so calm. He's so knowledgeable. He's so deep in his sort of love of the game and infectious, I think, in his attitude to everything he does. So I think a brilliant signing for Middlesex.
Yeah. So we're used to a bit of sort of cross river rivalry, aren't we, between
yes, exactly.
Middlesex and Surrey? So that's going to be even more ramped up now with the owners of the 200 franchises.
Absolutely, I think so. And I mean, obviously, the Oval Invincibles have been very impressive in the tournament overall, but so London Spirit have won it too. So the women have won it, and they've done well, reasonably well too. But I think it's going to be about the sort of the innovations they're going to bring in at two grounds eventually. It might not happen this year because this is a sort of filler year really before the tournament, the new names all start. So London Spirit could well end up called something else. And obviously,
like what, Yoz? Have you had any indication about what they could be called? I heard about a potential name change from London Spirit.
I don't know about the name change, but I've heard that and it's well reported actually, that they might wear MCC colours, a bacon and egg style shirts, so a sort of stripy look perhaps, or a panelled look for the London Spirit. I mean, the Oval Invincibles are inevitably be called Oval Indians, I suppose, after Mumbai Indians. That might sound a bit odd, but I mean, in a way, it's a bit like the Northern Superchargers being called the Northern Sunrisers, isn't it, as well? The Yorkshire franchise, they're now owned by Sunrisers from India. So, we are going to get quite a bit of change. But I do think there is going to be this underlying rivalry going on, which is going to stir up the tournament when it gets properly going in 2026 after this sort of interim year 2025.
Okay, well, that's just about it, Yoz.
Well, you're in Pakistan.
Yeah.
So where's your first call?
I'm going to Lahore on Wednesday for England, Australia on Saturday. And the tournament starts on Wednesday with Pakistan playing against New Zealand. And I'm part of the BBC team. And we have got ball-by-ball commentary on every game throughout the competition as part of our relatively new deal with the ICC to cover all the ICC tournaments, both men and women, and also some of the junior tournaments as well at the later stages, the under-19s, for example, from the semi-final stage onwards. Yeah, so really looking forward to it. It's funny, actually, I haven't been to Lahore since the 1996 World Cup final. I was just there for a couple of days, saw that incredible win by Sri Lanka against Australia. Felt like a huge upset at the time. And after the attack on the Sri Lanka team bus, I thought I'd never go back to Pakistan again. We just won't go back. There just won't be international cricket there. But I've now been. This will be the third trip in 2 years. So it just shows how wrong you can be. And that probably comes to our predictions as well for the tournament. But anyway, that's how we see it, almost on the eve of the tournament. But you could almost make a case out, couldn't you, for any of the sides making the semi-finals? I think that's what makes it interesting. It's a competitive, should be a really competitive tournament, and you actually be good to have a few upsets, wouldn't it? And some surprise teams in the semi-finals. Afghanistan and Bangladesh in the semi-finals, for example. It's not completely impossible or preposterous, especially on the day. It's very much a tournament on the day, and that's what gives it, in a way, that's what gives it its luster. I mean, the World Cup was 10-team group with everyone playing everyone, and it went on for a long time and made a lot of money, but it probably just did flag a little bit, didn't it? And it was kind of inevitable by the end who was going to make the semi-finals, or quite a few teams eliminated, including England. But this one, should hold our interest anyway over the next 3 weeks until India beat somebody in the final by 150 runs. I say that, look, the last time, of course, it was India who were absolutely annihilated by Pakistan. They beat them by, I think it was something like 170 runs in the final. It was a stunning effort from Pakistan. So you say people don't remember the Champions Trophies. In Pakistan, though, they absolutely do. And just as a footnote, yours, actually, I've just got up all the tournaments, and I tried to remember the tournaments. Who won? I got the winners. I tried to remember each of the tournaments. And I had a pretty good stab. Australia 2006. Where was that? I'm not sure where that was. But of course, with the World Cups, you remember all of them, don't you? But look, 1998 South Africa won in Bangladesh. New Zealand won in Kenya in 2000. 2002 was India, Sri Lanka, and I was there for that. That was that bizarre tournament where they staged the final twice and they couldn't get a result because it rained at the same time on each day. And in the end, they just ran out of time, so they had to share it. 2004 was West Indies at the Oval, beating England in about December time, or it felt like it anyway, because it was kind of the weather was grim and it was the end of September. 2006, Australia winning it. I actually can't remember that. 2009, Australia winning it. That was in South Africa when they wore those white. I think they were given those white blazers at the end of the game, and they were all parading around in their white blazers. 2013, India. That was at Edgbaston, a game England should have won, and they blew it. And then 2017, Pakistan at the Oval. So actually, that's not bad, is it? That was actually just off the top of my head. But 2000.
You need another podcast. I think you need a podcast of your own to go through that again in more detail.
2006, Australia. Where was that? Where did they win that? Oh, I remember. It was at the Brabourne Stadium against West Indies. Yeah, it was they won it in India. So another Australian victory in India. That's not bad, is it? Actually, try and drag all those Champions trophies up from my memory. And I promise you, I did just do it from my memory.
Well, we'll give you a big round of applause to end this podcast, and look forward to hearing from you when you're in Pakistan. We'll be back later in the week to report on the early stages of the Champions Trophy.
Great. Thanks very much for listening. Goodbye for now.